Awesome job, guys, for listening to the first video. We've got 140 to 147 left, and then you just have some multiple choice questions to answer that will be on the quiz tomorrow. So we're on Chapter 7, page 140. "Stacy, go bring me your coat," Mama said, a few days later as we gathered around the fire after supper. "I've got time to take up the sleeves now." "Uh-oh," exclaimed Christopher John, then immediately opened his reader as Mama looked down at him. Little man cupped his hand and whispered to me, "Boy, now he's gonna get it." That's all right, Mama," stuttered Stacy. "The coat's all right like it is." Mama opened her sewing box. "It's not all right. Now go get it for me." Stacy stood up and started slowly toward his room. Little man Christopher John and I watched him closely, wondering what he was going to do. He actually went into the room, but was gone only a moment before he reappeared and nervously clutched the back of his chair. "I ain't got the coat, Mama," he said. "Not got the coat?" cried Big Ma. Uncle Hammer looked up sharply from his paper, but remained silent. "Stacy," Mama said irritably, "bring me that coat, boy." "But, Mama, I really ain't got it. I gave it to TJ. "TJ!" Mama exclaimed. "Yes, ma'am, Mama," Stacy answered, then went on hurriedly as Mama's eyes glittered with rising anger. "The coat was too big for me, and TJ said it made me look like a preacher, and he had said since it fit him just right he'd take it off my hands till I grow into it. Then that way all the guys would stop laughing at me and call me preacher." He paused, waiting for someone to speak, but the only sound was heavy breathing and the crackle of burning hickory. Then, seeming more afraid of the silence than putting his neck further into the noose, he added, "But I didn't give it to him for good, Mama. Just lent it to him till I get big enough for it, and then—" Stacy's voice faded into an audible whisper as Mama slowly put the sewing box on the table behind her. I thought she was headed for the wide leather strap hanging in the kitchen, but she did not rise. In quiet anger, she glared at Stacy and admonished, "In this house, we do not give away what loved ones give to us. Now go bring me that coat." Backing away from her anger, Stacy turned to leave, but Uncle Hammer stopped him. "No," he said. "Leave the coat where it is." Mama turned bewildered toward Uncle Hammer. "Hammer, what are you saying? That's the best coat Stacy's ever had, and probably ever will have as long as he lives in this house. David and I can't afford a coat like that." Uncle Hammer leaned back in his chair, his eyes cold on Stacy. "Seems to me, if Stacy's not smart enough to hold on to a good coat, he don't deserve it. As far as I'm concerned, TJ can just keep that coat permanently. At least he knows a good thing when he sees it." "Hammer," Big Ma said, "let the boy go get the coat. That TJ probably done told him all sorts—" "Well, ain't Stacy got a brain? What the devil should he care what TJ thinks or what TJ says? Who is this TJ anyway? Does he put clothes on Stacy's back or fruit in front of him?" Uncle Hammer stood and walked over to Stacy as little man Christopher John and I followed him fearfully with our eyes. "I suppose if TJ told you it was summertime out there and you should run buck naked down the road because everybody else was doing it, you'd do that too, huh?" No, sir," Stacy replied, looking at the floor. "Now you hear me good on this. Look at me when I talk to you, boy." Immediately, Stacy raised his head and looked at Uncle Hammer. "If you ain't got the brains of a flea to see that this TJ fellow made a fool of you, then you'll never get anywhere in this world. It's tough out there, boy, and as long as there are people, there's going to be somebody to try to take what you got and trying to drag you down. It's up to you whether you let them or not. Now it seems to me you wanted that coat when I gave it to you, ain't that right?" Stacy managed a shaky, "Yes, sir." "And anybody with any sense would know it's a good thing, ain't that right?" This time Stacy could only nod. "Then if you want something and it's a good thing and you got it in the right way, you better hang on to it and don't let nobody talk you out of it. You care what a lot of useless people say about you, you'll never get anywhere, 'cause there's a lot of folks don't want you to make it. You understand what I'm telling you?" Yes, sir, Uncle Hammer," Stacy stammered. Uncle Hammer turned then and went back to his paper without having laid a hand on Stacy, but Stacy shook visibly from the encounter. Christopher John, Little Man, and I exchanged apprehensive glances. I don't know what they were thinking, but I for one was deciding right then and there not to do anything to rub Uncle Hammer the wrong way. I had no intention of ever facing a tongue lashing like that. Papa's bottle-warming whippings were quite enough for me, thank you. The last days of school before Christmas seemed interminable interminable. Each night, I fell asleep with the hope that the morning would bring Papa, and each morning when he wasn't there, I trudged to school, consoling myself that he would be home when I returned. But the days passed, prickly cold and windy, and he did not come. Added to the misery of the waiting and the cold was Lillian Jean, who managed to flounce past me with a superior smirk twice that week. I had already decided that she had had 2 flounces too many, but since I hadn't yet decided how to handle the matter, I postponed doing anything till after I had a chance to talk with Papa about the whole strawberry business. I knew perfectly well that he would not tear out of the house after Mr. Sims as Uncle Hammer had done, for he always took time to think through any move he made, but he would certainly advise me on how to handle Lillian Jean. Then, too, there was TJ, who, although not really my problem, was so obnoxiously flaunting Stacy's wool coat during these cold days that I had just about decided to deflate him at the same time I took care of Lillian Jean. Ever since the night Mr. Avey had brought him to the house to return the coat, and he had been told by Uncle Hammer and a faltering Stacy that the coat was his, TJ had been more unbearable than usual. He now praised the coat from the wide tips of its lapels to the very edges of its deep hem. No one had ever had a finer coat, no one had ever looked better in such a coat, and no one could ever hope to have such a coat again. Stacy was restrained from plugging TJ's mouth by Uncle Hammer's principle that a man did not blame others for his own stupidity. He learned from his mistake and became stronger for it. I, however, was not so restrained, and as far as I was concerned, if TJ kept up with this coat business, he could just hit the dirt at the same time as Miss Lillian Jean. The day before Christmas, I awoke to a soft murmuring of quiet voices gathered in the midnight blackness of morning. Big Ma was not beside me, and without a moment's doubt I knew why she was gone. Jumping from the bed, my feet barely hitting the deerskin rug, I rushed into Mama's room. "Oh, Papa," I cried, "I knew it was you." "Oh, there's my Cassie girl," Papa laughed, standing to catch me as I leapt into his arms. By the dawn, the house smelled of Sunday. Chicken frying, bacon sizzling, and smoked sausage baking. By evening, it reeked of Christmas. In the kitchen, sweet potato pies, egg custard pies, and rich butter pound cakes cooled. A gigantic coon, which Mr. Morris and Uncle Hammer and Stacy had secured in a night's hunt, baked in a sea of onions, garlic, and a fat orange-yellow yams. And a choice sugar-cured ham brought from the smokehouse awaited its turn in the oven. In the heart of the house, where we gathered after supper, freshly cut branches of long-needled pines lay over the fireplace mantel, adorned by winding vines of winter holly and bright red Christmas berries. And in the fireplace itself, in a black pan set on high wire rack, peanuts roasted over the hickory fire as the waning light of day swiftly deepened into a fine velvet night, speckled with white forerunners of a coming snow. And the warm sound of husky voices and rising laughter mingled in tales of sorrow and happiness of days past but not forgotten. "Them watermelons of old man Ellis's seemed like they just naturally tasted better than anybody else's," said Papa. "And old Hammer and me, we used to sneak up there whenever it'd get so hot you couldn't hardly move, and take a couple of them melons on down to the pond and let them get real chilled. Then, talking about eating, we did some kind of good eating." "Papa, you was stealing?" asked an astonished little man. Although he usually strongly disapproved of being held, he was now reclining comfortably in Papa's lap. "Well," Papa said, "not exactly. What we'd do was exchange one of the melons from our patch for his. Of course, it was still wrong for us to do it, but at the time it seemed all right." "Problem was, though," laughed Uncle Hammer, "old man Ellis grew them old fat green round watermelons, and ours was long and striped." "And Mr. Ellis was always right particular about his melons," interjected Papa. "He took the longest time to figure out what he was up to, but Lord, when he did." "You should have seen us run," Uncle Hammer said, standing. He shot one hand against and past the other. "Man, we was gone, and that old man was right behind us with a hickory stick hitting us upside the head." "Oh, that old man could run," cried Papa. "I didn't know nobody's legs could move that fast." Big Ma chuckled. "And as I recalls, your papa about wore y'all out when Mr. Ellis told him what y'all been up to. Of course, you know all them Ellises was natural-born runners. Y'all remember Mr. Ellis's brother Tom Lee? Well, one time We're going to stop there, ending a story, and we're going to pick up tomorrow on page 147. Go ahead and start answering your questions on the Google form. Study them tonight so you'll be ready for the quiz tomorrow.